Hello and welcome to this discussion of developing effective messages. We're going to talk today about what makes a message really good, what can make it really effective. And I think you'll find that the techniques we're going to discuss will be useful not only in health communication, but they can even help you in your own life, like if you are trying to persuade your boss that you need a raise or convince your parents to lend you some money. But most importantly, they can help you build effective messages for the audiences you're trying to reach as a health communication professional. There are a lot of things that we try to package into stories. There's a lot of, or into effective messages. There's a lot that we want to include because we're trying to tell a story that really involves a lot. We're trying to make it something that is actionable yet entertaining, that is attention grabbing yet substantiated and credible, that is compelling and persuasive. Lots of things that we want to accomplish with any given message. So how do we do it? Well, we're going to talk today about a very simple technique that uses actually just 3 steps, because effective messages consistently have 3 key components. And if you can learn what those components are and put the 3 steps together, I can guarantee that you will have a very effective message. Newspapers actually do this every day. They're some of the best storytellers out there. And if you look at newspaper articles, you can see the 3 steps that we're talking about today easily visible within the first few paragraphs of a story. So for example, the New York Times usually starts with the facts. They usually tell a story in this way. They might say something like, Pfizer announced today it has received FDA approval for a new medication designed to help the most severe arthritis sufferers gain mobility without surgery. In 3 years of clinical trials, the drug helped patients improve range of motion by an average of 200%. 20 million Americans suffer from severe arthritis. Jane Smith is one of them. After participating in Pfizer's clinical trial, she can now get out of bed for the first time in 10 years. Now that's one way of telling a story. We start with the lead that Pfizer's new medication for arthritis was approved today by the FDA. Then we give a little bit of factual information, and then we move into a human interest element. Another organization, another media outlet, maybe like the Wall Street Journal or a magazine or quite often television shows, will actually mix it up a little bit and start with the human element first. So they might say something like, Jane Smith got out of bed last month for the first time in 10 years. Like 20 million Americans, she suffers from severe arthritis. She's one of several hundred patients who increased mobility by an average of 200% in a 3-year clinical trial conducted by Pfizer. Pfizer announced today it has received FDA approval for its new medication, blah, blah, blah. So you see here, Pfizer is still an important part of the story, but the human element gets moved up. But the 2 stories demonstrate the same 3 steps. And we're going to follow those 3 steps in developing messages ourselves. So what is step 1? Well, when we have a message to deliver, we need to think about what the most important part of that message is. What is the thing that you want people to remember? And how can you boil it down into just 1 sentence? Why 1 sentence? Well, I'll show you how we're going to use this 1 sentence over and over again in different ways. But the main reason that we have to have 1 simple sentence, 1 concise sentence, is because we need to give the audience something to remember. And that's really important because of how inundated people are with information. There's been a lot of research to show how much people can retain. I mean, they're taking in information all the time. How much do they actually remember? How much can they actually take action on? And one study I saw recently said that after a television interview, people tend to forget about 40% of what they hear after an hour. After an hour, 40%, boom, gone, totally forgotten. After a day, they've forgotten about 60%, and after a week, about 90%. So if you're lucky enough to have pitched a story and gotten it on the news and people have paid attention and really digested the story, at the end of a week, you can't really expect them to remember much more than 10%. The unfortunate thing is that of that portion that they do remember, about 58% is how the person looked who was delivering the message. About 35% is how they came across, and only about 7% of that 10% is the content that is retained. So you have to do whatever you can to make sure that the person that you're talking to is really going to focus on that takeaway, that bottom line, and retain it. So step one, boil down your message into its most essential element. One sentence that is your bottom line. And you're going to hear this called different things. I've been using the term takeaway message sort of interchangeably here. It can also be called a take-home message. Some federal agencies have another term for it that's called the SOCO, the Single Overriding Communication Objective. No matter what you call it, it's important that it be distilled into that one sentence. And by the way, it's typically behavioral, but it can also be related to knowledge or attitude. So, step one, get it into one sentence. Step two, make your audience care. This is really important to remember because, without people actually caring, they are not going to retain it at all. I mean, they won't remember it for a second, let alone a week later. So you have to make your audience care. It has to be salient and relevant to them. And I think to figure out what will be most salient and relevant to people, it helps to get in the head of your audience and to think about the questions that people have when they're presented with new information. Typically, people have three questions when they hear something new. They want to know, so what? Who cares? What's in it for me? Now, they may not literally ask those questions, but what they're really saying from their perspective is, why should I pay attention to this? When they say, who cares? You're really answering the question, what is it that your audience cares about? And when they ask, what's in it for me? They're really wanting to know how this solves a problem for them about something that they need or something that they want. So whatever the message is, you need to be sure that you've thought about it from this perspective and that you've answered these questions for your audience. So, why quit smoking? Well, actually, let me back up and use the evacuate now, which I think is a very very simple message. If it's a disaster and your bottom line message is evacuate now, and somebody is asking, so what? Who cares? What's in it for me? Probably the most relevant question here is what's in it for me. You can save your life. Your life is more important than your property. Those are the kinds of things that people care about, and the questions that you can answer for them as you elaborate on the bottom line of evacuate now. So we've gone through the first two steps, thinking of the bottom line, thinking about what your audience cares about. What's the third step? Well, those two things together are not really enough to build a credible message because you've got to substantiate what you're saying with something else. And so when you prove your message to the audience, you're looking for facts, statistics, anecdotes, things that can back up what you're saying. So evacuate now is your bottom line message. Because it can save your life, because your life is more important than property, might be things that the audience cares about. And now you need to tell them some stories. You need to give them some facts. So you might present some facts about how, the fears that they have, like that their property might be looted if they leave, are really not true. Or you might present some survivorship facts about, who survives disasters, and talk about the low odds of actually surviving if you should remain in your home, and you live in beachfront property during a hurricane or whatever. So you might give them some information, some facts and statistics. Even more powerful would be if you can give them some anecdotes, if you can tell them some stories about people, real people who are like themselves and who have gone through the same thing. You can make them care and get across that bottom line much more effectively if you have these things to back it up. So again, in review, every message is going to have these three components. It's going to have the bottom line here at the bottom kind of as the foundation, which is one sentence that's concise, specific, consistent, and memorable. It's going to have proof, and it's going to make the audience care by answering the three questions that every audience has: so what, who cares, what's in it for me, in some way that will make them care. Now, as we talked earlier, the way that you tell these stories, the order that you tell these stories in a message, you can jumble it up. You can start with the proof, you can start with the bottom line, you can make them care first, you can mix it up as much as you want. You've just got to have those three components in order for your message to be effective, in order for it to work the way that it was intended.